Jonah was an ordinary man living in a bustling city. His days were filled with routine tasks, conversations with neighbors, and moments of quiet reflection. One evening, as Jonah sat by the flickering light of his oil lamp, he felt a stirring deep within his heart. It was a call, unmistakable and urgent. God spoke to Jonah, saying, "Go to the great city of Nineveh and tell the people there to change their ways. Their wickedness has reached me, and they must turn from their evil deeds." Jonah froze. Nineveh was notorious for its corruption and cruelty. The very thought of going there filled him with fear and anger. "Why should I help those people?" Jonah muttered to himself. "They deserve judgment, not mercy." Overwhelmed by his emotions, Jonah decided to run away from God's command. Instead of heading toward Nineveh, he boarded a ship bound for Tarshish, a distant land in the opposite direction. As Jonah boarded the ship, he glanced back at the shore, hoping to leave his guilt behind. He paid his fare and found a quiet corner to sit, keeping his head low to avoid conversation. The sailors, rough and weathered men, went about their tasks, preparing the ship to set sail. The sun dipped below the horizon, and Jonah felt a brief sense of relief as the land disappeared from view. But deep inside, he knew he could not outrun God. As the ship sailed into the open sea, Jonah tried to quiet his restless mind. The gentle rocking of the boat and the rhythmic sound of the waves seemed to lull him into a false sense of security. He closed his eyes, hoping sleep would offer some escape from his troubled thoughts. But as night fell, the skies darkened, and fierce winds began to howl. A violent storm arose, tossing the ship like a toy in the waves. The sailors, seasoned and strong, were terrified. They had faced storms before, but this one was unlike any they had ever seen. The winds roared, and the waves crashed over the sides of the ship, threatening to break it apart. They cried out to their gods, each man pleading for deliverance. Desperation gripped them as they threw cargo overboard to lighten the ship. Amid the chaos, Jonah was found below deck, asleep. The captain, drenched and frantic, shook him awake. "How can you sleep at a time like this? Get up and call upon your God. Perhaps he will spare us." The sailors gathered and decided to cast lots to determine who was responsible for the calamity. The lot fell on Jonah. Jonah confessed, "I am a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land. This storm is my fault. I'm running away from his command." Fear filled the sailors' hearts as they asked, "What should we do to make the sea calm again?" "Throw me into the sea," Jonah replied solemnly. "Then the storm will stop." The sailors hesitated, unwilling to take an innocent man's life. They rowed desperately, trying to reach land, but the storm only grew fiercer. Finally, with great reluctance, they lifted Jonah and cast him into the raging waters. Immediately, the sea grew calm, and the sailors were filled with awe. They offered sacrifices to the Lord and made vows to serve him. As Jonah sank into the depths of the sea, he felt the cold embrace of the water and the weight of his disobedience. The currents pulled him downward, and he saw flashes of light as the sun's rays disappeared. Just as his strength faded and he prepared to take his last breath, a massive fish, sent by God, swallowed him whole. Inside the fish's belly, Jonah found himself alive but surrounded by darkness. The walls of the fish's stomach pulsed around him, and the air was thick with the smell of salt and seaweed. Jonah's heart raced as he tried to make sense of his predicament. He was alive, but trapped in a living prison. For 3 days and nights, Jonah remained in the fish's belly. In that solitude, he reflected on his actions and the choices that had led him there. He realized the depth of his disobedience and the mercy of God in sparing his life. In his despair, Jonah turned to prayer. "In my distress, I called to you, Lord, and you answered me. From deep in the realm of the dead, I cried for help, and you listened to my cry. Though I was banished from your sight, I will look again toward your holy temple. You brought my life up from the pit, O Lord my God. When my life was ebbing away, I remembered you. Salvation comes from you alone." God heard Jonah's heartfelt prayer and commanded the fish to spit him out onto dry land. Gasping for air and covered in seaweed, Jonah knelt on the shore, overwhelmed by gratitude and determination to obey God's command. Once again, God's voice came to Jonah, "Go to Nineveh and deliver the message I have given you." This time, Jonah did not hesitate. He journeyed to Nineveh, a sprawling city so vast it took 3 days to walk through. The streets were filled with merchants, beggars, and rulers, all unaware of the judgment that loomed over them. As Jonah entered the city, he proclaimed with urgency, 40 days from now, Nineveh will be destroyed unless you turn from your wicked ways. His voice carried through the crowded streets, drawing the attention of all who heard him. The people of Nineveh were struck by Jonah's words. Something about his message resonated deeply, piercing their hearts. From the greatest to the least, the people humbled themselves. They fasted, prayed, and wore sackcloth as a sign of repentance. Even the king of Nineveh, a powerful and proud ruler, stepped down from his throne. He removed his royal robes, covered himself in sackcloth, and sat in the dust. The king issued a decree, "Let everyone call urgently on God. Let us give up our evil ways and violence. Who knows? God may yet relent and show us mercy." When God saw their sincere repentance, he had compassion and did not bring upon them the destruction he had threatened. The city of Nineveh, once known for its wickedness, was transformed by the power of God's mercy and the people's willingness to change. While the city rejoiced in God's mercy, Jonah sat outside Nineveh, angry and bitter. He built a shelter and waited to see what would happen to the city. Jonah's heart was heavy with resentment. He complained to God, saying, "Isn't this what I said would happen? I knew you are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love. That's why I ran away. It's better for me to die than to live." God replied gently, "Is it right for you to be angry?" As Jonah sat sulking, God provided a leafy plant to grow over his shelter, giving him shade and comfort. Jonah was pleased with the plant and felt a momentary relief from his anger. But the next day, God sent a worm to wither the plant, and a scorching wind to make Jonah uncomfortable. The sun blazed down on Jonah, and he grew faint, wishing for death. God said to Jonah, "You are concerned about a plant that you did not grow or tend. It sprang up overnight and died overnight. Should I not have concern for Nineveh, a city of more than 120,000 people who cannot tell their right hand from their left, and many animals as well?" Jonah was silent, and God's words lingered in his heart. Though the story ends here, it invites each of us to reflect on Jonah's journey and the lessons God teaches us through his experiences. Moral lesson. The story of Jonah and the big fish teaches us profound lessons about obedience, compassion, and God's boundless mercy. Jonah's journey reminds us that running from our responsibilities only leads to turmoil. When we choose to obey God's calling, even if it's difficult or frightening, we become instruments of his love and grace. It also shows us the importance of compassion. Jonah struggled to understand why Nineveh deserved mercy, but God's love extends to everyone, regardless of their past. Just as God gave Jonah a second chance, he gives us opportunities to learn, grow, and share his love with others. Lastly, Jonah's story encourages us to reflect on our own hearts. Are we quick to judge, or do we seek to understand and forgive? Let this story inspire us to embrace God's mercy and share it with the world. If Jonah's journey resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on your own life. Are there areas where you've been hesitant to follow God's calling? Remember, it's never too late to turn back and obey. Share this story with someone who might need encouragement today. Let's spread the message of love, compassion, and second chances.